an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Welcome to The Fatigue Fixer, the podcast where we get real about why you're so tired and what you can do about it. Every 2 weeks, we'll gather here for honest, heart-to-heart conversations about reclaiming your energy, your patience, and feeling truly at home in your body. I'm Dr. Sarah Vadeboncoeur, a naturopathic doctor, Menopause Society certified practitioner, Enneagram 3 entrepreneur with enough business ideas to last me 10 lifetimes, and a hockey and baseball mom. Over the past 15 years, I've helped thousands of women just like you cut through the confusion and finally feel like themselves again. And now, I want to hear from you too. Use the link in the show notes below to leave me a voicemail, to share your story, give feedback on an episode, ask a question, or tell me what's been exhausting you. And your voice might even make it onto the show. Together, we'll get to the root of what's really draining your energy and give you the tools, clarity, and encouragement you need to fix your fatigue. I hope you enjoy today's episode. I have a very special episode for you today because I am joined by one of my patients. And she is here to share her story. And I've invited her specifically because I know that her story is going to resonate for so many of you. I've had the pleasure of working with her and being her guide through her journey with burnout over the last 1.5 years. And I wanted her to share her journey and her experience and the different components of it because her story is not unique. And it is a story I hear in my office a lot. And I think it's a story that we need to bring to the surface and we need to be having out loud and normalizing. And so she was very gracious to be willing to come here and do that with us. Before we jump in and I introduce her, I want to set the stage a little bit because burnout has become almost like a verb that we throw out. Like, I'm so burnt out. And yes, we can feel that way, but burnout is something very specific. Burnout is defined as a syndrome that results from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. There are different types of burnout, but the burnout we're going to focus on today is certainly workplace-related burnout. And there's typically 3 things that we will see with burnout. The first one is feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. So obviously people are tired, but that alone is not sufficient for a burnout diagnosis. The second thing is that you have increased mental distance from your job or feelings of negativity or cynicism related to one's job. So often this will sound like, what is the point? Why am I doing this? Everyone here sucks. This is stupid. I don't know why I want to be here anymore. And then the third one is reduced professional efficacy. And what I see a lot for the women that I work with, because most of them are very high performers, this is the last part that will show up because most women will do everything in their power to maintain a high level of performance at work, even if it means burning themselves out even further. So even if you're hearing this and you're like, okay, I'm definitely tired and I definitely hate everyone at work and I hate my job, but I'm still performing, you could still have burnout. You just might be still in the high performance part of your burnout. And burnout is very common. We see that globally 38% of workers report suffering from burnout, and the rate for women is 42%, which is up from 38% last year, while for men it's about 30%, and that's actually down from last year. 7 in 10 Canadians have considered quitting their jobs due to burnout, with 3 in 10 making the jump. And this is something I'm seeing. This is something we'll talk about today. The role of stopping work, leaving work, what that can do and how that's part of it. But the other thing I see a lot, and we're seeing this reported too, is that women are more likely to switch jobs due to stress and burnout, and they're more likely to do that than men. So some women are not. Some women are leaving the workforce. I've had several patients who have essentially demoted themselves, if I can use that word, to either a lower demanding position, lower intensity position, because they are just finding it really difficult to manage some of those higher demanding positions because of everything that's on our plate. I'm so excited to welcome our guest today. Today's guest is a career civil servant who started at the ground level 30 years ago and worked her way into a senior executive role. Having held a number of responsibilities within the public service, she learned that her passion was in working in areas that created the conditions for people to thrive. This led to her work in employee development units, and her most rewarding roles have been in leadership training and workplace wellness. She has received awards for her contributions, including a Queen's Diamond Jubilee Award for her work on building respectful workplaces, and a King Charles III Coronation Award for her work in leadership development. She is an accredited life coach, a certified leadership development practitioner, an emotional intelligence trainer, and a passionate diversity, inclusion, and belonging ally. In the past several years, she has learned the hard way that having a passion for our work, loads of motivation, and a heap of better knowing does not prevent us from falling into burnout when we don't address some of the key issues. More important than her work roles, she is a wife and mom, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. She is grateful for family and friends, freedom and opportunity, her dogs, witty jokes, hot coffee, amen, rainy day naps, and the many chances we all get to learn and grow. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
We were kind of joking, not joking before we hit record, that your literal job was to make your workplace more friendly for people to not land in burnout. And yet, here you are.
Here I am. Yes, I am the classic case of Dr. Heal Thyself. I had every reason to know better, and I could see it for other people. But when it came to actually seeing it for myself, I just lost perspective.
Yeah. And I was telling you, preparing for this episode, this is a well-seen phenomenon that when we look at our workplaces, women are more likely to be engaged in activities to make the workplace better and healthier for everyone. And yet we are still more likely to burn out. Before we get into your burnout story and what allowed you to accept or acknowledge burnout, I'd love if we kind of go back, like bring us back, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, 5 years ago. Was burnout on your radar? Like, was it something that you thought about? Was it something that you thought you were at risk for? Like, where was burnout kind of in your radar before all of this happened?
Well, I definitely knew that it was something that people were struggling with. And because I'm the kind of person who's always dabbling in those wellness spaces and reading the books and listening to the podcasts, it was something that was coming up. But I took a really slow journey into it myself. And so it really built up in this kind of insidious, sneaky way. And I really didn't recognize it for what it was until I was deep into it. And even when it was put in front of me, logically, cognitively, in a way that my frontal lobe could agree with it, I was still in denial because I just didn't want that to be the thing that took me down.
Mm-hmm. I just think that wording is interesting, right? And I think this is why it's so hard for a lot of women, that we think that if we burnt out, we were taken down, we failed, we did something wrong, we are not strong enough. I find that interesting. And I think that's why a lot of women, and you're not the only one, and I want to talk about kind of our journey together and me kind of seeing this happening and the journey it took for you to be comfortable acknowledging it. But I see it with so many of the women I work with that I bring up the idea of burnout, or I kind of suggest it, and there is so much resistance. Where do you think some of that resistance came from? Like this idea of not wanting to be, that's what took you down?
Well, I think part of it is that I really did like my work. I really believed in my mandate. I really found value in what I did. Part of it was because my identity was so tied up in what I contributed at work. And that was something that had built up over time. And I think there's a bit of a trap for some of us, like in particular, working mothers, because we end up in this phase where we're building our careers at the same time we're helping to launch our kids into the world. And so our whole identity becomes wrapped up in what we do in the workplace and our kids' sports and activities. And, we call ourselves, I'm a hockey mom or I'm a dance mom or, whatever the case may be. And at some point, I think it's easy enough to lose ourselves because as our responsibilities grow at work and as our commitments grow, the time commitments to our kids as they get involved in more and more activities or competitive activities, well, where's the place that we can find the time to rob in order to facilitate those other two big things? And so it's usually in and around who we are. So if once upon a time, I'm an artist or I'm a runner or I'm a bookworm, that kind of starts to take up a lot smaller space in our lives. Like the footprint gets really small. It moves way to the back seat of the minivan. So it was hard for me to think of what I was giving up by not continuing to show up at work and be that person that I had built myself into. It's like I was trying to hold on to my crown, and to think that I had to admit that I was burnt out, it felt like giving it all up. It felt like I've spent 30 years building this. I have a reputation that's built around this. I have a team that's counting on me. I am delivering on a mandate. Dr. Sarah, I don't have time for this. This would be a significant inconvenience. So is there not maybe, I don't know, is there like a vitamin C infusion? Are there smelling salts? Like there's gotta be something else.
Just give me something. Yeah.
Yeah. Patch me up and put me back in the ring.
100%. As you were speaking, like that just really hit me, this idea. And this is so clearly documented with burnout. In order to continue to perform at the level that most of us are trying to in the workplace, we do exactly what you said. We start cutting out all the things that we see as like extras. And usually where we cut is our own activities, our own self-care, and actually all the things that make life meaningful. So now if you've cut out all of the meaning-making activities in your life, and most of your meaning is coming from your parenting or your work, and now someone comes in and says, your work is making you sick and you should step away, that would feel incredibly threatening to your identity if that is your main place that you are now feeling any type of satisfaction. I've never thought of it that way before. When we first met in the summer of 2024, I think I could see this train barreling down the tracks right into burnout. And you were not ready to see it yet, or you were not there yet. Can you talk about what was maybe, you've talked about this identity, anything else that was creating resistance to the idea that you might be heading towards burnout?
I think there was a lot of fear around having to be vulnerable because the outcome of that would be I would look weak because of the expectations that I felt other people had put on me, other people in the workplace who had invested in me, the mentors and, the people who had bet on me as, I guess I'll say, a commodity. I didn't want to turn into, the lame horse that fell at the 10th hurdle or something like that. I really wanted to continue to fulfill those expectations, and then there was this other thing that was going on too, that was this really internalized narrative about work, and work is what we do, and work is how we contribute, and it's good and it's noble. And, that hustle and grind culture is alive and well. I think that's one of the worst things that's happened to us in the last, 10 years, that whole idea that, well, you've got the same 24 hours in a day as Beyonce or,
Yeah, right.
hustle and grind and, work will save you. But I think that it's also something that has been with us for as long as, we've been telling stories and recording human experiences, because it is so built into, when we grow up. So I grew up, going to school, going to church in a farming family. That's a whole other part. I can get into the farming family contribution. But, that whole idea that cleanliness is next to godliness and time is money and idle hands are the devil's work. And parables and fables, that Aesop's fable about the grasshopper and the ant grasshopper sings all summer while the ant works, and then the grasshopper's going to starve. And so the ant says, well, you sang all summer, so I guess you starve now. Or, I learned French saying, La Ségale est enchantée, tout l'été se trouve à fort. And it's that whole, it's De La Fontaine's version of that parable about if you don't work hard, it's your own damn fault if you have to suffer. So, God's helps those who help themselves. And there are just, I could go on and on about all of the idioms and the sayings. And I internalized all of that. And then, yeah, I grew up on a family farm where my parents ran this farm. It was a lot of work. It was a big endeavor. My parents shared all kinds of really, really valuable messages with me growing up. But one of the ones that really stuck, because I suppose it was a good fit for my psyche and because it was reflected elsewhere amongst the other influences upon me, was that we work first and we play later. And when you live and work on a farm, the work is never done.
Right.
So when do you rest? Well, you don't, because the work is never done. So there's very little time for rest. And rest always feels like, to me, the way I perceived it, it felt like a luxury, an indulgence, a waste of time, laziness.
Mm-hmm.
So I got really good. The way I worked my way through the game of life and the way I secured reward and recognition was through hard work. And I found that, something that I could do really well was roll up my sleeves and throw myself into something. And it paid off and it paid off and it paid off. And the more it paid off, the more I dug in.
100%.
And I, rose through the ranks. And every time you take a new promotion, you get more work and you get more work and you get more work. And I can see why people would choose to demote themselves, because I think at some point I've actually seen studies that talk about, the level at work where people report the most satisfaction and meaning and work-life balance. And it's, I guess, the second level of management. So you're managing a few teams of a few people.
Right.
You're not yet at the executive level. So the only way I knew how to handle it was keep working harder, build the strategies, excel in time management, optimize everything in my life.
Yes.
I became a multitasker extraordinaire. My ability to be present was absolutely reduced to shambles.
Yeah. But again, you did this because that was what was modeled. That is what you learned a good person, a good wife, a good mom, a good daughter did. And you were rewarded for it, which is why most of us fall into this trap. We are highly rewarded for being really good workers. Part of what I see, and I'd love your thoughts if this is how you were looking at it. So in that moment, kind of, again, you are starting to see signs that things are not feeling good, which is why you sought out my help in the first place. And your work is just more and more demanding. And so the way that I often kind of see this and try to present this is that most of us, when asked, will say that health is a very high priority for us. But then when we look at the way that we behave, that's not always apparent. So if we kind of go back to that moment, what I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, your job was directly having a negative impact on your health. And you could feel that. And yet you were persistent in wanting to continue to do that work. Is that is that something that you were consciously aware of? Like at that point, had you made that connection? Like, okay, a lot of what I'm feeling is probably directly related to my work, and I'm choosing to stay here despite that. Was any of that happening for you at that time?
Yes, in the back of my mind, but I was so trying to not need to look at an option that meant that I couldn't continue to do my work. So I was trying to find other things like, is this perimenopause? If it's perimenopause and I can go on hormones, then that solves that. Is this undiagnosed ADHD that is finally catching up to me now? Well, then I could go on like Ritalin or Vyvanse or something. Well, that would solve that. But you're right. If anyone asked me, what are the things that are important to you? And I know this is the case because I did the exercise of listing out what are the things that are important to you, and then looking at, well, how much time and energy do you spend on each of these things? And there was a total inversion of Work wasn't even top 3, and yet it absolutely got the lion's share of my time and effort. So that was the thing, between vanity and fear for my health, that started being the real wake-up call that work is doing this, and I don't know how to find a way at work. It's short of going in and asking to be demoted, and, becoming an individual contributor or something. I don't know how to possibly do my work putting in any less effort. I don't know where the shortcuts are. I don't know where the corners are that I can cut. It just, every bit of it feels demanding of all of my time and attention and effort. And I can't. And yet I wanted to stay there and I wanted to continue doing the work. It was my identity. It was my income. Even more so than income was down. It was my identity. It was my recognition. It was my reward. That can't be an option. Leaving my work because of my health. I mean, at some point I got there, but it clearly wasn't there early in that journey.
Yeah. Do you remember the moment or what finally changed where you were able to accept and acknowledge that this was burnout?
So there was no singular moment. I had seen my family doctor, and he had been giving me suggestions and trying some things, including things like sleeping pills. Okay, if you really can't get to sleep, try these. And I think he got to the point where he didn't have anything else to offer me, which was when he said, well, why don't you try a naturopath? And then I had found you, I think, through the Fatigue Fixer. Actually, it was my hairdresser good old hairdressers that recommended you.
Love it.
And so he had been coaxing me to consider that I was burnt out. You started coaxing me to consider that I was burnt out. And then there was also a conversation. So I think it was sort of this little trifecta of his influence, your influence. And then I had a conversation with someone at work where I think one day I just was so overwhelmed. I ran into her in a stairwell at work as we were both, there late at the end of the day coming back from meetings. And I admitted to her that I was feeling, however I termed it, I probably started with just, really tired, overwhelmed. And she's a person that I always thought had it all together. She gets up at 4 a.m. to work out. She's working on her master's. She has children. She's also an executive. I thought she looks perfect every single day, all the time at work. She's the last person I expected to really understand it. And she told me that she had suffered from burnout and she had taken time off. And I didn't even know this about her. So I thought, well, the rumor mill didn't even, I hadn't been aware of that. She clearly still has a reputation intact. She's still allowed to work. She's still allowed to perform at a high level. And yet she's a person who took time off and walked away and got the help and care and rejuvenation that she needed to come back. And, so I think there was this slow dawning on top of the fact that I could not get past a few of the issues that really are core to burnout, which was I was just no longer being effective at work anymore. And, all of my previous strategies that had helped me to stay on top of things and to perform at a high level weren't working anymore. And one of my managers at work said to me one day, very kindly, "Are you sleeping okay?" And it was one of those times when I realized I am not fooling him. He sees that I'm forgetful, that I'm not piecing things together, that I'm slow on the uptake or I'm slow turning things around. I'm not fooling people anymore. The fact that he's asked me this, I think, is an indication that he thinks I'm showing up in the workplace operating on no sleep, which wasn't untrue. So I was no longer being effective, and the things and people that I really, really cared about were starting to agitate and irritate me. And that cynicism was really creeping in. Why am I doing all of this? It never gets any funding. Everyone says it's important, and yet we don't get the funding and we don't get the resources. And how is it both important and yet underfunded? And we're doing the same things over and over again. And it's all words, words, words without impact. And I remember one day sitting in my doctor's office, and I'm not a very demonstratively emotional person. I hardly ever cry. And I started getting tearful in my doctor's office saying, I got so irritated with my dogs and I yelled at them. And like my dogs are like, they are the apples of my eye. Like they don't get anything, but they are just such a source of joy. Like they don't get anything but the best of me. And I'd been so irritated with them. And it was just such a, like, it just felt like a breaking point. Like if I can't even come home from work and enjoy these two little creatures who are just 10 pounds of love, like they think I'm the sun that rises and sets every day. They think I'm the best. And I get so irritated with them, I am no longer functioning well. So I've just given you this whole cornucopia of events and experiences, but it's like I needed all 1,000 pieces of a jigsaw puzzle to piece it all together, which is really ironic given that I really knew better. I could have identified it from 100 yards away in anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in my own self, it took one thing that also was scary to me is I was starting to, whether it was my memory or I was starting to make these word substitutions that I didn't realize. So I would say something like, I would mean to say hot tub and I'd say pothole, or pine cone and I'd say pineapple. And the only person that was pointing it out to me was my husband. And he'd say, do you realize what you just said? And that really started to concern me too.
Yeah. Are you tired of being told everything is normal, even though you're exhausted and don't feel like yourself? You deserve better care than that. In my one-on-one practice, I help women just like you do a deep dive to figure out what's really draining your energy. Together, we'll get answers and create a clear, personalized plan to help you start feeling like yourself again. If you live in Ontario or the Outaouais region and you're ready for the next step, visit drsarahv.ca to learn more and book your appointment today. Because being tired all the time isn't normal, and you don't have to keep pushing through it. All of these kind of things, events, people come together, and now you're ready to accept or acknowledge that this is burnout. What prompts you or what happens that makes you decide to take time off work? Because I think this is another massive hurdle for a lot of women. There's a lot of pride. There's a lot of not wanting to let people down. There's this sense that there's no point taking time off because when I come back, the work will have piled up and it'll be even worse. How did you navigate that decision?
Well, part of it was that I was meant to be going on a work trip abroad. I was going to be away for a month. And part of it was thinking about having to reincorporate myself into the workplace after a month away. And it felt like I'm going to do so much work to get things stood up so that I can leave. And then when I come back a month later, I will be so behind and I'll have to do so much work to catch up. And I just don't have the capacity to do that. And yet I wasn't going to not go on the work trip because I was still thinking in terms of, but I made a commitment and I made obligations and I'm the subject matter resource that they tap to do this. And I can't let them down. And there's a whole team of people going with me that are expecting me to go. And there's a team of people in the office that's backing it that are expecting me to go. And I have to go and I have to do that. But I think that's going to be the last thing that I do because once I come back, I can't gear up to go back into that again.
I remember that appointment we had together and me just gently encourage you to really think about going on that trip. But yeah, you just were like, I committed, I gotta go. This is what I'm doing. Talk to us about those first couple weeks of being off work. Maybe what you thought they would look like and what they actually look like. How did you navigate those first couple of weeks of being away from work on your burnout recovery?
In a word, poorly. That's how I navigated them.
Okay.
I thought, it's going to be like a long weekend. I'll sleep in. I'll make some nice casseroles to put in the freezer, get ahead of some meals down the road for when I go back to work. I'll take care of some of the things that have been building up. There's baseboards that need a good scrub down, and the garage could use some reorganization. And then there's the storage room downstairs. And when I'm not doing those things, I will do all kinds of appointments related to getting better. So I approached burnout recovery like it was my full-time job. I was
recall.
still scheduling myself.
Yep.
I had no concept of just stop and rest. And when I did try to rest felt uncomfortable. It was awkward and icky, and I didn't want to do it. And so I would just get busy with something else. I was doing all kinds of busyness bypassing to avoid having to actually sink into burnout recovery.
You literally asked me for the productivity hack protocol for burnout.
It's so sad. It is so sad.
But it's not, it's so telling. And again, I'm so glad you're sharing this, because I know anyone listening right now, I just know that women are resonating with so much of what you're saying, because again, I wanted you here because your story is not unique in the sense that so many women go on burnout leave and think, great, I'm going to have time to do all the things that I didn't do while I was working and so tired. And they literally take the exact same work ethic, hyper productivity, hyper competence. And now they're like, well, I don't got to work. So now I got 8 hours a day that I'll just do all the home things. And they don't do the hard work, which I think this is the hardest work of burnout recovery, which is to sit in that discomfort, which is to acknowledge, I don't feel good when I rest. I have a really hard time. Why is that? What are the beliefs and the patterns and the things that are in me that led me to burnout, and that will very likely lead me right back if I don't address them?
And my nervous system was so wired all the time. So it was like I had this motor revving, but in trying to rest, it was like I was pulling on the emergency brake, but like I still had my foot on the gas, but yet I was putting my foot on the brake, or, using the emergency. It was so awkward at first. It wouldn't have felt better to keep going to work, but it wasn't much better. It wasn't a big relief. That's what I expected. I thought, oh, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And it wasn't immediately a big relief.
Now that you've been off work for several months now, what would you say are some of the biggest insights or things that you've learned about yourself, having removed yourself from the workplace?
So the first was those narratives and those identities that I have adopted all along, and all of the mental noise, that sound in my head that is always pushing me to do better and warning me if I don't, and pushing me to do better and warning me if I don't. And then the other thing was reframing my perspective and opinion about rest and rejuvenation and recovery. And it's not just the thing that comes after all the work is done, which frankly was probably going to be when I retired or something. That, it is actually the foundation from which the work gets done. It's the platform for everything else. And I know I'm all about, we need 8 hours of sleep. Like I have read that, I have adopted that, I endorse it, I'm fully on board. But it's not just the 8 hours of sleep. It's the time that we take to rest and to sit and to linger and to be present and to actually, feel the warmth of a cup of coffee in our hands and sit in a place and just let our minds wander. I don't know. I don't even think I'd ever sat on a park bench. I mean, maybe except when my children were small and playing at the park. But the point of sitting there then was to be supervising them.
Yeah.
But, to sit at a park bench and listen to the birds and to see that not as a reward for the work that was done, but to see that as the foundation from which the next spat of work will be accomplished. So I kind of flipped my script about work first, then rest. And now I'm working on flipping it to rest first and then work. So the rest actually fuels the work.
Yeah. And I would take it one level further, which is we can rest and not have to work after, right?
Yes.
We can rest for the sake of resting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you're saying is so important because a lot of women, we do things that look restful, but we're not resting because our brain is screaming at us while we do it, right? Maybe you're scrolling on your phone or you're watching Netflix, which I would argue is more numbing and distraction than rest. But like it looks restful, but it's not restful if the internal narrative is like, you should be doing something else. Why aren't you doing this? This is lazy. You're not being productive, right? That is the work that I think you've really embraced, which is why I wanted you to share your story. Because I do think that that is the real work, if I can frame it that way. And that's why I think taking time away from work on its own is not going to fix your burnout. If you just take all of the things that brought you there and you take them home for a couple of weeks or a month or 2 months and you just go right back, it's not going to change anything. But doing that internal work that you've been doing, I think, is where the magic happens. You've decided, and I think you're okay sharing this, you've decided to take an early retirement. Are you open to sharing kind of what influenced that decision, how you've decided that at this part of your journey?
Yeah, I think because now that I've been away from work and I see myself as something outside of, I spent 30 years in that same world. Now that I've stepped away from it, I can see so many other possibilities for how I spend my limited number of days on this earth. And I'm not saying that with any amount of moroseness or negativity. Now there's other things that I want to explore, and I want to explore it sooner. And so I have just decided that rather than gearing up to get back into that workplace, I've done so much work to make it okay to transition away now that I just feel like it just really feels sort of in my heart that that's the natural progression for me. And so it's aligning for me. It's happening at the right time in my life. It's okay. I am getting all kinds of feedback from people about, well, are you sure? Someone said to me recently, okay, but I think it's really important that when you're retired, you know what your purpose is. And I just kind of bristled because I thought, I know what they're saying is that you need to have, like, how are you going to earn your allotment of oxygen?
Right.
So what if my purpose is enjoying life? What if my purpose,
What a concept that a woman's purpose would be to enjoy her life. Imagine.
Yep.
I love that. If there are women listening here who are seeing themselves in your story, who can relate, who maybe are acknowledging that maybe they also are experiencing symptoms of burnout, or they have clearly been experiencing burnout and maybe haven't known what to do, any words of advice, any words of encouragement for other women who maybe find themselves in the same situation that you have?
I would say for sure that, we are here for a relatively short period of time, and each of us, the miracles that we are, deserve to have a life that feels good to live. And the people that we love, we are invaluable to them. And not just we as entities, but our presence and our attention and our contentment are invaluable to them. And I think that in order to make all the magic happen that we like to make happen, it's really important to incorporate rest and rejuvenation and to identify ourselves as something other than a person who produces, a person who performs, a person who problem solves. And I think that the more that each of us, normalize this and model this, the more we open the door to letting someone else take a little bit of a lighter approach and breathe a little easier. And, I don't think that the ladies that went before us burned their bras so that we could run around with our hair on fire. That is not what they were trying to achieve. They didn't want to be contained but instead we are allowing ourselves to be consumed. And, I'm not making this into a feminist manifesto. I don't even know enough to, talk academically in that lane. But I just really think that we can be smart and savvy about how we spend our time and our energy and the days of this one life that we've been given.
I love that. And it's so true. This is not what they wanted for us. This is not it.
And I think that the conversation, it's not about bubble baths and it's not about boundaries. No. That's not how we fix burnout. We fix burnout by really being honest and analyzing our identity.
Yes. And I think that's the shift that the reason I think you are so comfortable taking a retirement, if you now have an identity that is not totally rooted in your relation to others, right? Like, yes, you're still a mom, but that's not your whole identity or core being. And your whole identity isn't wrapped up as someone who produces and works, right? You found other ways to feel worthy and whole. And I think that's so beautiful. Any last thoughts that you want to share with our listeners?
I think the one thing that I will share, because it was very surprising for me, is that when I did share with people, so I had to deliver this news to 2 different bosses because one was acting and then my substantive boss came back. And each time, at first I thought I'm going to take a month off. And then the next time I extended it to 3 months off. So I had to keep going back and saying, there's been a change and I'm not actually coming back as anticipated. But the first boss that I spoke with, who was the acting boss, was absolutely so supportive and ended up sharing with me some of her own journey through her career. It was just so wonderful to feel like that first time I delivered the message and I felt like I was dropping a shoe, and to have it just accepted and to be encouraged and supported. Then my substantive boss came back and I had to share with her as well. And again, I thought, I'm just going to own my narrative on this. I mean, I could just hand them a doctor's note and say nothing, but I am a person about relationships and I have a relationship with these people that I work with. And again, she was just so supportive and encouraging. And don't worry about the workplace. We will continue to make things happen here. There's only one person that can take care of you, and it's you. And we all are meant to have lives outside of work, and we don't need to fall on our swords in the parking lot at the end of a workday. And that had been one of my biggest fears, was thinking that I was disappointing people and letting them down.
I think if you have people who truly care about you, that is hopefully how they will respond. And I think the hard part, and this could be a whole other episode, we need to acknowledge that our solutions to burnout are twofold. Some of them are very individual and very personal, and that's what we've really focused on today. But the other half is the workplace. And we need to be making our workplaces friendlier for everyone, for their health, for their mental health, for parents, for all kinds of different people. And it can feel really frustrating and really hard to try to navigate burnout by yourself when you feel like your workplace is not supportive. So I also want to acknowledge that, because I know that can be true for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So if you are listening to this and you're wondering, what the heck do I do now? What are the next steps? I'm going to post in the show notes a couple of assessments that you can take yourself through. One is the Maslow Burnout Inventory. This is a great kind of little quiz that you can do assessment to see how you score or rank in terms of a burnout diagnosis. And as our guest has shared, please make sure that you surround yourself with people who can support you, whether that's your family doctor, a naturopathic doctor, a therapist, a coach. There are lots of things that we can do to help people recover from burnout. So don't feel like you have to just suffer through it. And that, again, taking time away from work can be part of the solution, but it's not going to fix your burnout on its own. So please make sure that you're getting the supports that you need. And I will share some of those again in the show notes. I want to thank our guest for sharing so openly. Thank you for that. And for everyone who is listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. You can always comment or send me a DM, and you can also leave me a voicemail on the show now to share your thoughts about this episode. I will see you back here in 2 weeks. I know your time is precious, so it means so much to me that you're here. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a woman in your life who could use a little extra energy and encouragement today. It's a small way to show her you care, because we're all in this together. Wondering what the next step is? Find out what's really draining your energy by taking my fatigue fingerprint quiz at fatiguefixer.ca/quiz. You'll discover which of the 5 most common types of fatigue you're dealing with, like frazzled fatigue, where your body's exhausted but your mind won't turn off, or drained fatigue, where no amount of sleep ever feels like enough. Your results will include recommended labs to ask your doctor about, plus my top suggestions for habits and practices that can help you start feeling more rested, calm, and in control. Because here's the thing, being tired all the time isn't normal, and you deserve to feel like yourself again. And hey, if you've got a story to share, a question, or just something on your mind, leave me a voicemail. Your voice might even make it into a future episode. Thanks again for listening, and remember, it's not all in your head. I believe you, and we'll figure this out together. I'll see you right back here in 2 weeks.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.